Before you hear her story, remember this. Some betrayals do not break a woman. They build the fire she returns with. They thought Eleanor Hartwell was finished the moment her stepmother stole her inheritance. They thought society would swallow her, shame her, forget her name. But fate had other plans. Because on the night she lost everything, a powerful duke who once vanished from her life stepped forward with a truth that would shake all of London and awaken the woman destiny had been waiting for. This is not a story of rescue. It is a story of rebirth. And when Eleanor rises, every secret, every scandal, every lie will burn in her light. Chapter 1. The Wound. Rain had a way of remembering things. It fell in thin, silver threads over Ashdown Manor the morning Eleanor Hartwell was told her life amounted to nothing less than nothing. In fact, a smear of ink on a document, a line struck through a will, a fortune erased with the same care one might use when removing dust from a sleeve. Eleanor stood at the far end of the drawing room, fingers pressed against the stiff fabric of her morning gown, watching as Mr. Hales, her late father's solicitor, closed the leather ledger with a soft but decisive snap. The room smelled of lilac water and polished oak, a fragrance her stepmother adored, though it always reminded Eleanor of a closed jewelry box filled with gems she would never be permitted to touch. "Is that all?" Lady Agatha Ashdown asked, reclining on the chaise as though presiding over a matinee performance. "No surprises? No hidden bequests? No sentimental tokens that must be delivered to our sweet Eleanor?" Her voice dripped honey and venom in equal measure. Mr. Hales coughed, removed his spectacles, and dabbed the bridge of his nose. "I am afraid that is all, my lady. Not even the cottage in Surrey?" Eleanor asked quietly. Her voice felt alien to her, as though it belonged to someone standing behind her, begging her to be brave. "Your father promised many things," Lady Agatha interrupted, a brittle laugh escaping her. "Dreams, assurances, tender words. Men often do that when they are dying." Eleanor stiffened. "He was not dying when he made those promises." "No," Agatha replied, smile sharp as a blade. "But he was tired. And tired men say anything to keep peace in the house." Her stepsister, Clara, perfect curls, perfect posture, perfect cruelty, hid her grin behind a lace handkerchief. Mr. Hales shifted uneasily. "Miss Hartwell, I regret to inform you that the Surrey cottage, along with all properties, assets, incomes, and holdings of your late father, have been transferred solely to Lady Agatha Ashdown." The words lingered in the air like broken glass. Agatha's laugh this time was melodious, mirthful enough to echo. "Oh, Eleanor, you do look shocked. Did you truly believe your father would leave his fortune in the hands of a girl who reads poetry instead of social calendars? A girl who insists on charity work, who challenges every family guest with opinions? She spread her hands as if the concept were absurd. "No man rewards a daughter for being inconvenient." Eleanor felt something inside her crack, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a soft, terrible finality. A fracture of hope, a severing of trust. "He adored me," Eleanor whispered, unsure who she meant to convince. "Of course he did," her stepmother cooed, rising to smooth imaginary creases in her silk gown. "But affection and inheritance are not the same thing." Agatha leaned close, her perfume a cloying mixture of rose and powder. "You have inherited nothing, Eleanor. Nothing at all." Clara giggled. It sounded like a bell rung for the wrong occasion. Eleanor drew in a slow breath. "Then what becomes of me? My future? My home?" Mr. Hales hesitated too long. Then, "Miss Hartwell, Lady Agatha is under no legal responsibility to house you beyond the period of mourning." Agatha's lips twitched. "And mourning, my dear, ends today." Eleanor felt her stomach drop. So that was it. A life dismantled in under an hour. "Pack your things," her stepmother said lazily. "Clara needs the south wing for her season preparations, and I cannot have you distracting our guests with whatever it is you do." "Whatever I do," Eleanor repeated almost to herself. "Brooding, reading, existing too loudly." "I see." But she didn't, not fully. Not until Agatha walked away, humming, her skirts trailing behind her like the cape of a conquering queen. Only then did the truth settle like ash over Eleanor's skin. There would be no London season for her, no inheritance, no dowry, no safety, no future. She was no one now, and yet, somewhere beneath the ache, beneath the humiliation, beneath the hollow spaces left by her father's absence. Something stirred. Something small, cold, defiant. A whisper. "You survived worse than this." For the first time, Eleanor met Clara's eyes and did not look away. Clara's smirk faltered just slightly, as though she sensed that the girl before her was not the same girl who had entered this room. Agatha's voice floated back from the staircase. "Oh, and Eleanor, do be quick. We have guests tonight. The Duke of Harrow is expected." The name struck her like a physical blow. The Duke of Harrow. Nicholas, the man who had once held her heartbeat in the palm of his hand. The man who could make silence feel sacred and distance feel unbearable. The man who had disappeared from her life with no word, no explanation, only rumors of coldness, scandal, and a past he refused to speak of. He would see her like this, stripped of status, abandoned, humiliated. Eleanor closed her eyes. The wound deepened. The rain continued its steady descent outside the windows, soft, relentless, and strangely comforting. Eleanor lifted her chin. "Very well," she whispered into the empty room. "If I have nothing, then I have nothing to lose." The door creaked behind her. Her breath caught. A shadow filled the threshold. A voice she had not heard in years, smooth, low, unmistakably, his broke the silence. Eleanor? Nicholas, Duke of Harrow, stood there, and he had heard everything. Chapter Cox. Return. Collision. For a heartbeat, Eleanor believed she had conjured him from memory. Nicholas Harrow looked almost as she remembered, broad-shouldered, impossibly composed, dark hair tamed into obedience, a face carved in clean, severe lines. Only his eyes had changed. They had always been intense. Now, they looked haunted. He took a step into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded far too final. I'm sorry," he said, the words surprisingly rough. "I did not mean to intrude." Liar, she thought, though the sting of seeing him again left little room for coherent accusation. "You never used to apologize for entering a room," Eleanor replied, her tone cool. "I suppose much has changed." His gaze flicked over her in morning black, hands clenched at her sides, chin tilted up in fragile defiance. Something in his expression tightened, as if the sight of her hurt him. "It has," he said quietly. "Everything has." Eleanor refused to let those words sink beneath her skin. If she let them reach her heart, they would dig into old scars that had never properly healed. "You are a guest of Lady Agatha's, I assume," she said. "How fortunate for her. She collects powerful acquaintances as other women collect brooches." Nicholas flinched almost imperceptibly. "I came at your father's invitation," he replied. "Months ago. A standing agreement that I did not think to cancel after his passing." "My father has been buried for 3 weeks," Eleanor said. "And you arrive now?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, laid bare in the air between them. Once, she would have swallowed such words, terrified of appearing ungrateful, too demanding, too much. But she had inherited nothing. No fortune, no security, no expectation to be pleasing. "Eleanor, I only just received word," Nicholas began, jaw tensing. "Half the letters from Ashdown seem to arrive drowned or delayed." "Oh, do not blame the post for your absence," she cut in, a brittle smile curving her lips. "It is unkind enough to blame the weather for a broken promise." His eyes flashed. "I did not break." He stopped, exhaled slowly. "This is hardly the moment." "No," she agreed. "The moment has already passed. Years ago." Silence folded around them, thick and suffocating. Eleanor became acutely aware of the way her pulse fluttered beneath her skin, of the sound of the rain, of the weight of his gaze. He took a step closer. "Mr. Hales's voice carries," Nicholas said. "I heard enough to know that something is very wrong." "Do the details entertain you?" Eleanor asked, unable to stop herself. "My ruin makes for excellent conversation, I've heard. Did you know, Harrow, that Ashdown's wild little daughter has inherited nothing? Not even the cottage in Surrey, not even a ring." The mocking lilt in her voice made his expression turn thunderous. "You think I came here to be entertained?" His tone was low steel. "You think I would stand by and watch you be disposed of?" she supplied. "That is the word they are too polite to use. But it is accurate." Eleanor. Her name on his tongue was a memory and a wound all at once. He reached into his coat, withdrawing a folded document. "I came to offer my condolences," he said, "and to discuss arrangements. Your father requested of me before he died." Something inside her lurched. "Arrangements?" Nicholas hesitated, glancing toward the door, then back at her. "This is not a conversation we should have here. Not under this roof. Not with Lady Agatha listening through keyholes." "Then you have my sympathy," Eleanor said, "for this is no longer my roof. I will be gone before supper." His composure cracked. "Gone? Where?" She almost laughed. "That, Your Grace, is the delightful part. When one inherits nothing, the entire world becomes hypothetically available. I might become a companion, a governess, a seamstress, a ghost." "You are speaking nonsense." "I have been informed my nonsense is no longer required in this house," she replied. "I intend to remove it before I am bodily thrown out." Nicholas stepped closer still, enough that she could see the faint shadow of sleeplessness beneath his eyes. "You cannot simply vanish into some position. You were not made to serve at another woman's dressing table. And yet, I was not made an heiress either, so it seems my design has been poorly considered by Providence." He stared at her, frustration and something far darker flickering across his features. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but fierce. "You are coming to London." Eleanor blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "London," he repeated. "You will not stay here to be tormented. You will not be shoved into some dreary post by a woman who despises the mere sound of your thoughts. You will come to Harrow House until matters can be set in order." "My, how swiftly we have returned to commanding," she said. "Is this how you speak to all women, or only the ones whose hearts you once misplaced?" Color touched his cheekbones. "This has nothing to do with—" "It has everything to do with it," she said sharply. "Do not pretend we are strangers negotiating a practical arrangement." The air between them crackled with things unsaid. Summer walks by the river, gloved fingers brushing, unfinished letters, a kiss nearly stolen in the conservatory, and then swallowed back when a chaperone cleared her throat in the next room. Promises never quite spoken, but lived in the glances they shared. And then his silence. His disappearance. The brutal, echoing quiet where his words should have been. "I do not trust you," Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not with my future. Not with my name. Not with my anything." His throat worked. For a moment, he looked almost young, like the Nicholas who used to argue with her about philosophy in the library until the candles burned low. "I deserve that," he said. "I deserve worse." "Then we are agreed," she replied. "Good day, Your Grace." She turned to leave, skirts swishing, heart rattling painfully against her ribs. "Eleanor." His voice stopped her at the door. "If you walk out of this room without hearing what your father entrusted to me, you may never forgive yourself." She froze. Slowly, she turned back. "What did he entrust to you?" Nicholas unfolded the document, hands steady despite the storm inside his eyes. "Your father knew," he said, "that Lady Agatha would do exactly as she has done, which is why he arranged for a portion of his investments and holdings to be transferred out of her reach several years ago, to an account I manage. In your name." The room seemed to tilt. "That is impossible," Eleanor whispered. "Mr. Hales said—" "Mr. Hales sees what Lady Agatha allows him to see," Nicholas said grimly. "Your father came to me privately. He asked me to keep certain assets invisible until you reached 25, at which point they were to be turned entirely over to you." "I am not yet 25. "No," he agreed. "But you are no longer safe here." Eleanor's pulse roared in her ears. "So you stand here and tell me that I have what? A secret fortune hidden somewhere between your accounts in London's shadowed banks?" "Yes," Nicholas said simply. "Enough to give you independence, a home, a life untouched by Lady Agatha's greed." She stared at him. Every instinct warred inside her. Hope clawed its way up her throat, wild and desperate, but it collided with the jagged remains of old hurt. "If this is a jest," she said, her voice shaking, "it is monstrous even for a duke." "I have done many monstrous things," Nicholas replied, "but this is not one of them." He stepped closer, close enough now that she could feel the heat of him, the steady rise and fall of his chest. "Come to London," he said, softer now. "Let me show you what your father left for you. Let me do at least one thing right." The plea in his voice startled her more than the content of his words. Nicholas Harrow did not beg. He commanded. He negotiated. He cut through opposition like a blade through silk. "And in return?" she asked. His jaw flexed. "In return, I will ask only that you hear the truth about why I disappeared. And then if you wish to hate me, you may do so with full knowledge." She swallowed. "And if I choose not to go?" His gaze darkened. "Then I will inform Lady Agatha publicly that you possess an independent fortune she cannot touch. I will watch her choke on the news. And I will pray you find your way to London before the vultures do." The image of her stepmother's face, shocked, enraged, cornered, flashed before her. It was a tempting vision, almost intoxicating. But even more intoxicating was the thought of walking into a London drawing room, not as a discarded dependent, but as a woman who did not need anyone's approval to breathe. "You would ruin your relationship with her for my sake?" Eleanor asked quietly. Nicholas's lips curved in something that was not quite a smile. "My relationship with Lady Agatha has never been cordial enough to concern me. And this is not for your sake alone." "No? This is for your father's sake," he said. "And for my own soul." There it was, the crack in his armor, the shadow behind his eyes. Guilt, heavy and unrelenting. Eleanor exhaled slowly. "Very well," she said at last. "I will go to London, for my father's sake, not for yours." "As you wish," he replied. "But understand this, Your Grace," she added, drawing herself to full height. "You may escort me to London. You may present documents and accounts and all the glittering promises of independence. But you will not buy my forgiveness with numbers on a page. You lost the right to that long ago." Nicholas bowed his head. "I know." A knock shattered the fragile intimacy of the moment. Lady Agatha's voice floated through the door, sweet and sharp. "Your Grace? I do hope you're not allowing our Eleanor to burden you with her dramatics. We must speak of this evening's dinner. Society expects you in London, not hidden away in my late husband's dreary library." Eleanor and Nicholas exchanged a look. "Come," Agatha continued. "London is waiting for you, Duke Harrow, and our little Eleanor will soon be out of your way entirely." Nicholas's gaze did not leave Eleanor's. "On the contrary, Lady Agatha," he called out, his voice suddenly cold, perfectly aristocratic. "It seems London has been waiting for her." Eleanor's breath caught. Lady Agatha went very quiet on the other side of the door. Chapter 3. The Duke's Secret Regret. London had never felt colder than on the night Nicholas Harrow returned from the continent 3 years ago, ashen-faced, bloodied, and carrying a truth he'd sworn never to reveal. He remembered the carriage ride from Whitehall to Harrow House as if it had been carved into his bones, rain lashing the windows, his father's last words echoing inside his head like a curse, and a sealed letter in his pocket bearing Eleanor's name. He had meant to give it to her. He had meant to explain everything. But duty, merciless, relentless duty, had dragged him under. And now, standing again in a corridor that still smelled faintly of Ashdown Manor's lavender polish, Nicholas felt the weight of those years settling on him like a shroud. He had been too late once. He would not be late again. The Duke's study later that evening. Nicholas sat alone in the small guest study, the crackling fire offering little warmth to the ice lodged beneath his ribs. He leaned back in the worn leather chair, exhaling a long breath as the events of the day replayed in agonizing detail. He had known Eleanor would be wounded by her father's will. He had not known she would be cast out like an inconvenient servant. The moment he overheard Agatha's triumphant laughter, a fury he had long kept chained surged through him. A fury born of guilt, love, and years of silent regret. He opened his coat and removed a small bundle tied with a dark ribbon. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Eleanor. Letters he had written but never sent. Letters filled with confessions he never had the courage to speak. Nicholas lifted the first sheet, the ink slightly faded, the edges soft from being handled too many times. "My dearest Eleanor, the night I left Ashdown, I made a promise to your father, one I cannot yet speak of. I fear you will hate me for what I must do." He forced his eyes away. Reading them only worsened the wound, but not reading them felt like betrayal. He regretted everything, not just the silence, not just the distance, but the reason for both. His father, Dorian Harrow, the late Duke, had left Nicholas a legacy that should have been a crown but felt more like a chain. Prestige, land, wealth, but also scandal buried beneath polished marble floors. A scandal that touched Eleanor directly. Nicholas pressed a hand to his forehead, struggling against the memory. His father had meddled in Ashdown affairs, manipulated inheritances, invested in ventures Eleanor's father relied upon, and demanded favors in return. Lady Agatha had not destroyed Eleanor's security alone. The Duke of Harrow's father had played a part. Nicholas had sworn to fix it, to make amends, to protect Eleanor from the fallout. But his methods had been clumsy, cowardly, half measures that left them both bleeding. He had withdrawn from her, thinking distance would shield her. Instead, it had crushed her. A soft knock broke the silence. Nicholas stiffened. "Enter," he said, expecting a servant. But it was not a servant. It was Mr. Hales, the solicitor, hat in hand, cheeks flushed with the embarrassment of a man who knew he'd been complicit in injustice. "Your Grace," Hales said hesitantly, "Lady Agatha requests your counsel regarding Eleanor." Nicholas set the bundle of letters aside. "Of course she does." His voice was crisp ice. "She fears I may interfere." Hales swallowed. "She fears something. I am not certain what." Nicholas rose from his chair, his expression carved from stone. "Tell her I shall speak with her soon. But first, there is something you and I must discuss." Hales blinked. "Your Grace?" Nicholas stepped closer, voice low, lethal with intent. "My father placed you under obligations that no respectable man should have agreed to. If you wish to salvage your reputation and avoid charges of malpractice, you will provide me with every document Lady Agatha has hidden or altered." Hales paled. I cannot." "You will," Nicholas said softly. "Because you know what she has done is illegal. And because I will not allow Eleanor to leave this manor in disgrace while her rightful inheritance rots in locked drawers." Hales's resolve crumbled like wet paper. "I have copies," he whispered, "hidden, for fear Agatha might destroy them." Nicholas nodded once. "Bring them to me within the hour. Do so quietly." Hales hurried out. Nicholas sank back into the chair. For a long moment, he let his head fall into his hands. He had spent years attempting to shield Eleanor from the consequences of his father's sins, only to become one of the consequences himself. He remembered the night he fell in love with her. The Ashdown midsummer ball. Eleanor in a gown, the color of moonlit water, laughing at something he had said openly, freely before remembering she was supposed to be shy and composed. He had wanted her from that moment, not as a duchess, not as a prize, but as the one person who saw through the title and into the haunted quiet inside him. But wanting her had been dangerous. Loving her? Impossible. Or so he had thought. Now, the impossibility of loving her paled beside the impossibility of losing her. Across the manor Eleanor's room, Eleanor stood before her small travel trunk, folding her father's handkerchiefs with trembling fingers. The room felt smaller than ever, as if her entire life had been packed into neat corners she would no longer occupy. But it wasn't sorrow that unsettled her. It was Nicholas. His presence, his intensity, his insistence that her father had left her more than she knew, and the look in his eyes when she challenged him, pained, hungry, regretful. A man carrying a secret that weighed as heavily as chains. "Why did you disappear, Nicholas? And why does it still hurt?" She shut the trunk too quickly. The latch snapped loudly. At that moment, she heard footsteps outside her door. A familiar voice. "Nicholas." Her breath caught. Back in the study, Nicholas made his decision. He rose to his feet, shoulders squared as though stepping into battle. He would tell her everything. No more secrets. No more evasions. No more half-truths. Even if it cost him whatever fragile thread still existed between them. He reached for the bundle of letters, hesitated, then tucked them inside his coat. He strode toward the door, paused, because standing in the doorway, pale, storm-eyed, and braced as if preparing for heartbreak, was Eleanor. Her hands were clenched at her sides, her breath unsteady. "Your Grace," she said quietly, "I believe it is time you told me what you owe me." Nicholas' heart twisted. Not what he owed her, what he had stolen from her without ever meaning to. He stepped toward her. "Eleanor," he said, voice shaking for the first time, "you deserve the truth. All of it." She lifted her chin. "Then speak it." Nicholas inhaled slowly. "The reason I left you," he said, "begins with something my father did. Something that destroyed your father's security and bound me in a promise that cost me you." Eleanor went still, very still. "What did he do, Nicholas?" Nicholas parted his lips, but footsteps thundered down the hall. Voices, raised, Alarmed, Hales burst into view. Panicked. Your Grace? Lady Agatha, she's discovered the missing documents. She's furious she's coming for Eleanor. Nicholas's expression turned lethal. He looked at Eleanor. Stay with me, he said. Her pulse stuttered. In fear. In anger. In something far more dangerous. Chapter 4. Rising tension. Eleanor had expected Lady Agatha's rage. She had not expected its speed. The woman swept down the corridor like a storm in silk, her stepsister Clara fluttering nervously behind her. Rage sharpened every line of Agatha's face. Her usually elegant composure dissolved into something feral and unrestrained. There you are, Agatha hissed the moment she spotted Eleanor standing near the study doorway. Conspiring already? My, you do move quickly when survival demands it. Nicholas shifted subtly in front of Eleanor, just enough to place himself between them. It was the smallest gesture, but it felt monumental. Agatha's lip curled. How gallant of you, Your Grace. Defending the orphan like a knight in a cheap novel. A muscle twitched in Nicholas's jaw. Lady Agatha, I would advise strongly that you restrain yourself. I will do no such thing, she snapped, voice echoing off the paneled walls. You've been meddling where you have no right. You think I don't know? You think I haven't noticed my late husband's records being examined? Records that should have been disclosed to Eleanor, Nicholas said, voice cold as a blade. Records you concealed. Eleanor felt her heart thrum painfully. Truth was inching out of the shadows. Agatha's eyes burned into her. You ungrateful girl! After everything I've done to preserve this household's name, this is how you repay me? By throwing yourself under the Duke's pity for scraps of sympathy? Eleanor stiffened. She opened her mouth to speak, but Nicholas beat her to it. Enough. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of command that made dukes feared, soldiers obey, and salons fall silent. This is neither the time nor the place for accusations, he continued. Miss Hartwell will be leaving for London under my protection. Agatha blinked as if slapped. Excuse me? You heard me. Agatha laughed a brittle, panicked sound. You truly intend to parade her into society? A girl with no dowry, no prospects, no pedigree to stand on? You cannot be serious, Your Grace. Nicholas didn't flinch. I am entirely serious. Glad I gasped. Eleanor could have sworn the temperature in the corridor dropped 10 degrees. Agatha recovered quickly, her spite hardening. You will ruin yourself. And for what? A girl who could not even keep your interest 3 years ago. Eleanor's breath hitched. Nicholas froze. A terrible silence unfolded. Clara took a small step back. Even she knew her mother had crossed a line. Agatha pressed on. Yes, I remember how it was. Eleanor fluttering after you like some hopeful little sparrow. And you, so noble, so distant, so uninterested. And now you mean to rescue her? Agatha snorted. You must be desperate. Eleanor wanted to speak, to retort, to protect herself, but she couldn't breathe. Nicholas slowly turned his head, his face unreadable. Lady Agatha, he said softly, if you speak about Miss Hartwell in that manner again, I will do more than escort her to London. Agatha laughed, but the sound trembled. You cannot threaten me, she said. You may be a duke, but you have no authority here. Nicholas's expression cooled further. You are mistaken. I have every authority where Miss Hartwell is concerned. Agatha's eyes narrowed. Why? Because her father trusted you? Because you once fancied yourself her guardian? Or because you are attempting to correct your own guilty conscience? Nicholas stilled. And Eleanor knew Agatha had stumbled onto something real. Nicholas stepped forward, voice low and dangerous. This conversation ends now. Then take her, Agatha spat. Take her. She is no responsibility of mine. Never has been. The words sliced cleanly. Eleanor felt them cut, but they did not draw blood as they once had. She had already lost everything Agatha could take. Nicholas inhaled sharply. Gather your belongings, he murmured to Eleanor. We leave within the hour. Eleanor nodded numbly, but she wasn't numb. Something was beginning to wake inside her, hot, steady, furious. And Agatha saw it. It unsettled her. An unexpected arrival. Eleanor returned to her room to pack the last of her belongings, little more than 2 dresses, a hairbrush, a few books, and her father's letters. She was closing her trunk when she heard a carriage outside. Not Nicholas. A different one. Moments later, a footman hurried down the hall, pausing at her doorway. A Mr. Laurent has arrived for you, miss. Eleanor blinked. Laurent? The footman nodded. He insists he must speak to you immediately. Her pulse quickened not with fear, but confusion. Julien Laurent, the French philosopher's son, the man she had met only once at a charity lecture in Bath, who had debated literature with her for an entire evening, never once looking bored or superior. A man who had remembered her, written to her, praised her essays. A man who saw her. Eleanor smoothed her skirt. "Tell him I'll be down shortly." Nicholas's voice echoed faintly from downstairs, speaking with footmen about trunks and arrangements. She should tell him she was stepping out for a moment. But something held her back. Something whispered, "Just breathe without him for a moment." The entry hall. Julien Laurent stood beneath the chandelier, dripping rainwater and clutching a leather satchel. His dark hair curled damply at his temples, his smile warm and breathtakingly sincere. "Eleanor," he said as soon as she approached, "I came as soon as I read the notice in the papers. I feared you might be—" He paused, taking in her pallor. His voice softened. "You are distressed." Her throat tightened. "You should not have come," she whispered. "It is complicated here." "I expected as much." Julien stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Your stepmother is a serpent. It was only a matter of time before she showed her fangs." Eleanor let out a shaky laugh. "You always did speak plainly." "I speak truth," he corrected gently. "You deserve better than this. Better than a life dictated by a cruel woman and her shallow world." His hand brushed hers lightly, respectfully. Heat shot up her arm. Julien drew a slow breath. "Eleanor, I came to take you to London, to offer you a position at the Laurent Institute." He paused, eyes glowing with something deeper than friendship. "And to tell you that you need not face the world alone." Her breath caught. This was an offer of partnership, not rescue, not charity. Partnership. Hope fluttered inside her chest. And then, footsteps thundered down the staircase. Nicholas. His boots hit the last step like the punctuation mark of a storm. He stopped cold when he saw Julien standing far too close to Eleanor. His eyes darkened, his jaw locked, his entire body went still. "Eleanor," he said slowly. "Who is this man?" Julien turned, offering a polite bow. "Julien Laurent, your grace. I have come from Miss Hartwell." Nicholas's expression was ice. "No," he said quietly. "You have not." Now, Chapter 5. Public confrontation. The tension in the entry hall was thick enough to snap. Nicholas and Julien faced one another like two storms approaching the same coast. Different winds, different tempers, but equally capable of destruction. Eleanor felt the air shift, humming with masculine pride, buried jealousy, and unspoken claims neither man had any right to make. Julien broke the silence first. "Miss Hartwell," he said gently, "I arrived because I feared you would be in distress. I did not know you would already have assistance." Nicholas's lips curved in something that resembled a polite smile, but without a trace of warmth. "Your concern is noted," he said, "and unnecessary." Unnecessary, as if Julien's presence were an inconvenience, as if Eleanor's heartbreak were not hers to manage. Julien straightened, his own tone cooling. "Your Grace, Miss Hartwell, is free to decide whose aid she accepts." Nicholas' eyes darkened. He took a step forward, placing himself subtly closer to Eleanor. "Indeed she is." His gaze flicked to her. "Eleanor?" She swallowed. Julien waited with patient respect. Nicholas waited with barely controlled desperation. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment. She would not choose, not yet. "I appreciate both of you," she said softly. "But I must gather myself before making any decisions." That should have ended it, but nothing in her life ever ended cleanly. The unwanted audience. A gasp floated down from the staircase, Clara. Behind her stood two visiting ladies, friends of Agatha's, their fans fluttering like gossip-hungry butterflies. Their eyes were wide, their lips parted in delighted horror. "Oh dear," one whispered, far too loudly. "Is Miss Hartwell entertaining two suitors?" Agatha appeared seconds later, her expression a mask of saccharine innocence, barely concealing triumph. My, she exclaimed. "What a situation! Our little Eleanor is suddenly so popular." She emphasized the last word with a sneer. Nicholas' jaw tightened. Julien stiffened politely. Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks. This was the moment Agatha lived for public humiliation. Whispered scandals, insinuations sharp as knives. "Perhaps," Agatha continued, eyes sparkling, "the gentlemen are confused. After all, it is unusual for a woman with no dowry, no prospects, and no family support to receive such attention. Julian opened his mouth to rebuke her, but Nicholas spoke first. "Lady Agatha," he said quietly, "you would do well to tread carefully." The warning slipped through the room like the unsheathing of a blade. Agatha feigned offense. "Why, Your Grace? I only mean that Eleanor's circumstances have changed." "She is not your concern," Nicholas replied coldly. "And she is hardly yours," Agatha snapped. "Unless," her voice dropped into a vicious purr, "you intend to make her your charity project?" The watching ladies gasped. Clara pressed a hand to her lips. Eleanor went pale. Julian stepped forward instantly. "Miss Hartwell is no one's charity," he said firmly. "She is a woman of intelligence, talent, and dignity qualities you seem to find threatening, madame." Several fans fluttered at once. Gasps scattered like seeds. Agatha's eyes flashed. "How dare you?" Nicholas moved next to Eleanor close enough that she could feel the heat of him, close enough to shield her from the spectators' hungry gazes. "Enough," he commanded. "This spectacle ends now." But Agatha was not finished. "Oh, does it? Because society will want to know why two gentlemen arrived at my home in defense of a penniless girl. It will wonder what attachment exists. And she placed a hand dramatically on her chest, will be forced to answer." The cruelty was deliberate, surgical. Eleanor felt herself shrink. Julian took her hand. Nicholas's eyes dropped to the gesture, and something in him tightened, almost violently. Julian spoke softly, but with absolute conviction. "Miss Hartwell, if you wish, you may leave here under my escort. You owe this household nothing, and you owe society even less." Agatha scoffed. "And what could you offer her? A place in some dusty institute filled with radicals and poets?" Julian's smile was serene. "Peace, respect, freedom." Eleanor's breath caught. Nicholas went utterly still. Julian turned to her again, thumb brushing her knuckles with reverence rather than possession. "You do not have to choose now," he said gently. "But know this, I will stand with you publicly, socially, intellectually, however long you need. Without condition." Without condition. Such a simple phrase. Such an extraordinary offer. Eleanor felt something warm and unfamiliar bloom in her chest. And yet, her gaze drifted, almost unwillingly, to Nicholas. He looked carved from tension and torment. His eyes locked on her hand in Julian's. When she pulled it back, Nicholas exhaled, quiet, shaky. He stepped forward, his voice low. "Eleanor," Nicholas said, "come with me. There is something your father entrusted to me. Something I must reveal tonight." Julian's brow arched. "Secrets again, Your Grace?" Nicholas ignored him. "You deserve the whole truth, and whatever you decide after hearing it, I will abide by." The hall fell into breathless silence. This was no longer embarrassment, no longer gossip. It was a battle of intentions, a clash of futures. Agatha watched eagerly, anticipating Eleanor's collapse. Instead, Eleanor lifted her chin. "I will hear the truth," she said to Nicholas. "But not here." Agatha blinked. "What?" Eleanor turned to the gathered women, to Clara, to the servants pretending not to listen. "I am not a spectacle," she said steadily, "and I will not be spoken about as though I am an object to be passed between hands." Julian smiled, faintly proud. Nicholas's eyes softened in a way that made her chest ache. Eleanor stepped back from both men, her voice clear enough to silence even the whispering ladies. "I will leave this house tonight, but I will not leave it in shame." Agatha sputtered. Julian bowed his head with admiration. Nicholas straightened, something fierce lighting in him. "As you wish." But the confrontation was not over. From the far side of the hall, a carriage door slammed outside, followed by the unmistakable sound of more arrivals. Agatha's face drained of color. Eleanor's stomach dropped. The butler hurried in. "Lady Agatha, Lady Wexford, and the Duchess of Yarmouth have arrived unexpectedly. They request an audience." Agatha's knees wobbled. The Duchess of Yarmouth, one of the most powerful matrons in London society. Agatha had composed this humiliation for Eleanor. But now, the audience was far larger and far more dangerous. Nicholas muttered under his breath, "Of all nights." Julian leaned in, whispering, "Stand tall, Eleanor. This is your moment." She lifted her chin just as the grand doors swung open, and the Duchess swept in. Chapter 6. Revelation of Truth. The Duchess of Yarmouth entered Ashdown Manor with the easy authority of a woman accustomed to bending entire ballrooms with a lifted brow. Her gown, deep plum silk, rustled like judgment as she crossed the threshold. Behind her trailed Lady Wexford, two younger companions, and a hush that swallowed the hall whole. Lady Agatha nearly collapsed into a curtsy. "Your Grace, what an unexpected honor." The Duchess raised a hand, silencing her. "Lady Agatha," she said coolly. "I heard shouting from the lane. One wonders what sort of household conducts its private business at such volume." Heat crept up Agatha's neck. "It is nothing. A small misunderstanding." But the Duchess's eyes had already found Eleanor, and the Duke, and Julien Laurent, and the tension thick enough to choke on. "Oh," the Duchess murmured, stepping closer. "This is not a misunderstanding. This is a story." Agatha blanched. Nicholas bowed stiffly. "Your Grace." Eleanor curtsied, pulse hammering. She felt exposed her disgrace, her future. Her impossible choices laid bare in front of one of the sharpest tongues in the empire. The Duchess surveyed her slowly. "Miss Hartwell, is it? I recall your father. A respectable gentleman, dignified, widely liked." Eleanor nodded. "Thank you, Your Grace." His daughter should not look as though she has been dragged through fear and humiliation. Her gaze snapped to Agatha. "Explain." Agatha opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Julian stepped forward before she recovered. "Miss Hartwell has been mistreated," he said with steady confidence. "Her inheritance was stolen, her position revoked. She was cast out without dignity or due notice." Gasps whispered across the hall. Agatha sputtered. "Cast out? Stolen? Preposterous!" "It is not preposterous," Nicholas said, voice quiet but devastating. "It is documented." Eleanor felt her breath catch. He was going to expose the truth. Here. Now. In front of the Duchess, Agatha turned a sickly shade of gray. The Duchess arched a single, lethal eyebrow. "How interesting." Nicholas moved beside Eleanor, not touching her, but close enough that she felt steadied by his presence. "Your Grace," he said, addressing the Duchess with formal precision. "Mr. Hartwell came to me shortly before his death. He suspected Lady Agatha was attempting to redirect portions of his estate. He asked me to secure certain investments in trust until Miss Hartwell reached the age of 25. Murmurs rippled through the spectators. Lady Wexford whispered, "So the girl does have something." Nicholas nodded once. "She does. She has enough to live independently for the rest of her life." Eleanor's knees nearly buckled. It was real. Not a trick. Not pity. Truth. Agatha lunged forward. "This is slander. Fabrication. Why would my husband entrust anything to you?" Nicholas' expression chilled. "Because he no longer trusted you." The room erupted in quiet shock. Agatha's voice cracked. "That is a lie." Julian spoke calmly. "I have read the documents, Lady Agatha. They bear legal seals and signatures." She spun toward him. "You? You are nothing but a foreign nobody." The Duchess stiffened. "Lady Agatha," she said sharply, "you embarrass yourself." Agatha faltered, breath coming in fast. Panicked bursts. And then, like a cornered animal, she turned on Eleanor. "All of this spectacle is your doing," she cried. "You've always believed the world owed you something. A clever girl with her books and her charity fantasies, so ungrateful, so arrogant." No, Eleanor didn't shout. She didn't tremble. Her voice was even controlled final. Agatha fell silent as the entire hall turned to look at Eleanor. Her pulse drummed, but she did not waver. "You do not get to define me anymore," Eleanor said softly. "Not my worth, not my voice, not my future." Her stepsister Clara stared at her, eyes wide with something like respect? Fear? Maybe both. Nicholas watched her with a raw intensity, as if her words carved open something in him. The Duchess nodded approvingly. "Well said, Miss Hartwell." Agatha was trembling now, fury and desperation twisting her expression. "Do not pretend you are anything but a nobody, Eleanor. Without this man," she gestured violently at Nicholas, "you would be nothing." Eleanor's heart stuttered. Everyone waited. Nicholas's breath hitched, as if bracing for her answer. Eleanor lifted her chin. "I would be myself," she said quietly. "And that is not nothing." There was a silence so profound it felt like snowfall. Then the Duchess turned to Nicholas. "You intend to escort Miss Hartwell to London?" "Yes," Nicholas said, unwavering. Julian spoke too. "As do I." The Duchess smiled faintly, amused by the duel forming before her eyes. My, how very competitive London is becoming." Eleanor wanted the floor to swallow her whole. The Duchess folded her hands. Miss Hartwell, I will say only this. It is not often that two men, one a duke, one a rising scholar, stake their reputations for the same woman. Perhaps society has misjudged you. Agatha hissed. This is absurd. That will do, Lady Agatha, the Duchess snapped, voice slicing the air. The matriarch turned back to Eleanor. Gather your things. You will leave this house tonight. Your stepmother has lost any claim to you. Agatha gasped. You cannot banish me from my own home. Oh, your home remains, the Duchess said coolly, but your influence does not. Clara hid a smile behind her glove. Eleanor stood frozen not from fear, but from the dizzying shift of her entire fate. Nicholas stepped close, too close, voice low, intimate. Eleanor, will you walk with me? There is still more you must hear, and I fear it will not wait for London. She swallowed. More? Julian's soft voice cut in. If he means to confess something that will wound you, I would rather he not do it alone. Nicholas shot him a glare. Julian returned it with calm defiance. Eleanor's head spun. Two men so different standing on opposite sides of the same battlefield. Because of her. Because she mattered. Very well, Eleanor said. We will speak. All of us. Julian blinked. All? Eleanor nodded. If this truth involves my father, my future, and your past, then it will not be whispered in corners. Not anymore. Nicholas inhaled sharply, caught between admiration and dread. Eleanor, his voice faltered, what I am about to tell you, it may change everything. Then let it. He looked at her for a long moment, haunted, aching before finally speaking. It concerns my father, and what he did to yours. Her blood ran cold. Julian looked sharply at him. Agatha leaned forward, desperate for the ammunition. The Duchess stiffened. Eleanor's legs suddenly felt hollow beneath her, as if the floor had tilted. Tell me, she whispered. Nicholas met her eyes. No walls, no shields, no duke, only a man suffocating under the weight of his own guilt. Your father lost far more than a fortune, Eleanor, he said. And mine was the reason. Chapter 7. The Rival's Offer. The hall emptied slowly, like a room exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Clara retreated first, pale and speechless. Lady Wexford whispered scandal into the Duchess's ear. Lady Agatha, trembling with fury, vanished into her private chambers. Only Eleanor, Nicholas, Julian, and the Duchess remained. And one truth, bleeding and enormous, hung between them. Eleanor swallowed, her hands cold despite the heat in the room. My father lost more than a fortune, she repeated softly. And yours was the reason? Nicholas shut his eyes briefly as if bracing for impact. Yes. Explain, the Duchess commanded quietly, stepping aside to afford them privacy without truly leaving. Nicholas turned to Julian. You may wish to leave for this. Julian met Eleanor's house, not his. Do you wish me to leave? Eleanor inhaled. She didn't trust her legs, or her heart, or her ability to absorb another blow alone. No, she whispered. Stay. Nicholas' jaw tightened, but he accepted it. He turned back to her, grief hollowing his voice. My father, the late Duke of Harrow, made investments across dozens of estates, some legitimate, some not. His eyes darkened. Your father trusted him. Too much. Eleanor felt her pulse throb behind her ribs. And he betrayed that trust? Nicholas nodded once. Your father's business was tied to a partnership with mine. Alone at first, then more. He believed my father would secure certain merchant contracts for him. But instead, my father diverted profits, concealed losses, and used your father's accounts to cover debts of his own. Her throat closed. Julian looked horrified. Mon Dieu. Nicolas continued, voice hollow. By the time your father realized what had happened, it was too late. The estate was bleeding funds. Properties were falling into debt. And to protect his pride and you, he kept it secret. Eleanor's knees buckled. Julian's hand shot out, steadying her by the elbow. Nicholas winced at the sight, but didn't look away. My father, he said hoarsely, destroyed yours, ruined him financially, humiliated him professionally, sent him into a despair he masked behind charm and dignity. Eleanor covered her mouth. The room blurred. Your father came to me, Nicholas continued. He begged me to help him untangle the damage. I did what I could. I moved funds quietly, restructured accounts, hid assets in your name to protect them from both my father's reach and Lady Agatha's greed. Eleanor's voice shook as she forced it out. And why did you disappear? Nicholas looked shattered. Because I discovered something worse. Julian stepped forward. If you intend to deepen her suffering— No, Nicholas said sharply. This is the part she must hear. He faced Eleanor fully, his expression raw. My father intended to force your father into a public scandal, to make him sign over the Surrey lands entirely, to render you dependent, vulnerable. He said a woman with no dowry could always be placed. Eleanor's breath stopped. So I did the only thing I could think to do, Nicholas whispered. I cut ties. I found evidence. I threatened to expose him unless he left you alone. Eleanor stared at him, trembling. And he agreed? No. He disowned me. The Duchess inhaled sharply. Nicholas shrugged one shoulder, as if the memory still stung. I left England for several months to secure the proof I needed. But by the time I returned, his voice cracked. Your father was dead. The silence afterward was suffocating. Eleanor's heart felt as if it were bruising inside her chest. So you knew, she said slowly. You knew what your father intended to do to us, and you said nothing to me. I wanted to, Nicholas said, agony threading every word. But your father begged me to protect you from the ugliness. He said telling you would break your spirit. I promised him I would wait until the estate was safe again. Her eyes burned. Until you decided I could handle the truth? Nicholas closed his eyes. Yes, and in the meantime, she whispered, you left me. I never stopped writing, he said, voice thick. Dozens of letters. None sent, none worthy. I was drowning in guilt, Eleanor. I couldn't face you. Tears blurred her vision. Julian's hand tightened around hers. Nicholas's expression changed anguish, sharpening into something possessive and desperate. Eleanor, he murmured, stepping closer. I never stopped thinking of you. Not once. I would have burned my title to the ground if it meant protecting you. She flinched back. No, she whispered. You do not get to speak of devotion when you let me believe you forgot me, when you left me to grieve my father alone, when you allowed Lady Agatha to destroy me while you watched from afar. Nicholas looked gutted. I deserve that. Julian stepped forward then, placing himself subtly between them. Shield, ally, anchor. Eleanor, he said softly, you owe the Duke nothing. His guilt is not your burden to carry. Nicholas stiffened. She owes me truth, as I owe her. She owes you nothing, Julian repeated, eyes flashing. Least of all forgiveness. Eleanor felt the tension between them vibrate like a struck string. Julian turned to her, voice gentling. Eleanor, I did not come only to offer you protection from your stepmother. I came because I believe in you, your mind, your vision. Your ability to change things in ways society refuses to imagine. Her breath shook. I want you to come to London, he continued, but not as a ward of mine, as a colleague, a partner, someone whose voice will shape the future of the Laurent Institute. I value you not out of guilt, not out of history, but out of profound respect. Nicholas's jaw clenched so hard the muscle twitched. Julian took Eleanor's hand once more, slowly, deliberately. Miss Hartwell, he said softly. I offer you a life that is yours, free of debts, free of titles, free of the weight of a duke's sins. Nicholas inhaled sharply. Eleanor looked between them. Julian's steady hope. Nicholas's tortured yearning. Two very different men, two very different futures. But she saw something clearly now. She was not choosing between men. She was choosing the woman she would become. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I need time. Julian nodded gracefully. Nicholas closed his eyes in pain, but the moment was broken by a sudden shriek from upstairs. Eleanor! Clara's voice rang out breathless. Agatha, she's gone mad. She's ordering the servants to burn your belongings before you leave. Nicholas lunged toward the stairs. Julian followed. Eleanor's heart slammed. Her life, her memories, everything Agatha had not already taken. No, she cried, running after them. But when she reached the landing, she froze. Agatha stood outside Eleanor's room, torch in hand, eyes wild, fury unhinged. And she threw the flame forward, straight into Eleanor's trunk. Chapter 8. Heroes Humbling. For one terrible, suspended second, Eleanor could not move. Her trunk, one of the few remnants of her father's life, burst into flame, the old wood catching with a crackling roar. Smoke curled upward like dark fingers. Embers spat across the carpet. Agatha stepped back, her face twisted in triumphant, unhinged fury. That, she hissed, is what becomes of ungrateful girls. Eleanor's scream tore from her throat. No! She lunged forward, but Nicholas reached her first. "Stay back!" he barked, grabbing her arm just as the flames surged. Julian was already ripping down the curtains, beating at the fire with frantic precision. A footman collided with the wall, panicked, before Nicholas's command snapped through the chaos. "Water! Now!" But Eleanor barely heard him. Her heart was breaking. Again, and again, watching the last pieces of her father's memory turn to ash. Her books, her letters, her sketches, his pocket watch, gone. Her breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. Nicholas was beside her instantly, steadying her shoulders. "Eleanor, look at me. Breathe." She shook him off, tears streaking her cheeks. Don't touch me." Not when her world was burning. Not when it was his world that had started all of this. Agatha's laughter rose in shrill triumph. Good riddance. Those pathetic relics should have been tossed out months ago. Julian spun toward her, eyes blazing. "You are monstrous." "I am the mistress of this house," Agatha shrieked. "I will not have you foreigners and fallen dukes ordering me about." Nicholas stepped forward with a calm so deadly it silenced the entire corridor. "Lady Agatha." His voice was soft, too soft. Agatha's shoulders tightened. "You will apologize to Miss Hartwell," Nicholas said, "or I will see to it that London knows exactly what you attempted to conceal." Agatha froze. Eleanor, trembling and devastated, whispered, "No, not like this." Nicholas turned to her. "Eleanor, this is my battle," she said, wiping her tears, but not her fury. "Not yours." Julian watched her with quiet awe. Nicholas stepped back, understanding. Eleanor approached Agatha slowly. Even with the fire raging behind her, she looked impossibly composed, hair disheveled, cheeks wet, but posture unbroken. "Lady Agatha," she said, voice steady despite the devastation, "burning my belongings will not burn the truth of what you've done." Agatha sputtered. "Truth? You stole my father's legacy," Eleanor continued. "You lied to the solicitor, manipulated his grief, and when I posed an inconvenience, you chose cruelty as your weapon." Her gaze sharpened. "But cruelty loses its power," Eleanor whispered, "when it is exposed." Agatha pallid. The Duchess of Yarmouth appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by the smoke and shouting. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. "Good heavens," she murmured. "What have you done, Lady Agatha?" Agatha stammered. I simply—" Nicholas stepped aside, letting the Duchess see the blackening trunk, the smoldering remains of Eleanor's life. The Duchess's expression turned glacial. "Lady Agatha Ashdown," she said, voice carrying down the hall like a bell toll, "you have disgraced your household, and should Miss Hartwell choose to bring this before the magistrate, I will personally support her claim." Agatha's mouth fell open. "You cannot." "I can," the Duchess replied, "because the flames behind you say enough." Agatha swayed, grasping the doorframe. But Eleanor wasn't done. "Lady Agatha," she said, "I will not seek vengeance. I will not drag your name through the courts. But hear me." She stepped closer. "I will leave this house tonight free of your reach, and you will not speak my name again, not as insult, not as cautionary tale, not as mockery. I will not exist to you." Agatha's voice cracked. "You cannot banish me from my own stepdaughter's memory. You banished yourself," Eleanor replied. Silence roared through the hallway. The Duchess nodded approvingly. Julian bowed his head, proud. Nicholas stared at her with something like awe and agony. The fire finally died under the footman's efforts. Smoke lingered like the last breath of a dying era. Nicholas turned to the Duchess. "Your Grace, I will take Miss Hartwell to London tonight. Under my protection." Eleanor stiffened. "I have not agreed to—" Nicholas stepped forward and did something no duke had done in front of a duchess, a scholar, and half a household staff. He knelt. The hall gasped. Eleanor's breath vanished. "Eleanor Hartwell," Nicholas said, voice raw and breaking, "I beg your forgiveness, not for my father's sins, but for my own cowardice." Julian's eyes widened. The Duchess inhaled sharply. But Nicholas did not look away from Eleanor. "I should have been here when your father fell into despair," he whispered. "I should have stood beside you when the estate crumbled. I should have protected you from every cruelty Agatha inflicted. I should have been the man you believed I was." His voice fractured. "I cannot erase the past, but I can promise you this: I will never again allow you to stand alone while others tear at your dignity. Not as a duke, not as a man, not as someone who once loved you beyond reason." And still, his throat closed. "Still does." Eleanor trembled. Julian looked down, pain flickering across his face. Nicholas remained on one knee, powerful, humbled, vulnerable. "Say the word," he whispered, "and I will do whatever you ask, even if it is to walk away forever." Eleanor's heart cracked. The room spun. Tears burned behind her eyes. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, a footman burst in, panting. "Your Grace, Miss Hartwell, the solicitor Hales, requests immediate audience. He says he's found something urgent." Nicholas rose instantly. Julian stepped beside Eleanor protectively. The Duchess stiffened. Eleanor swallowed hard. "What has he found?" she asked. The footman hesitated, eyes wide. "Evidence, miss," he said, "that your father did not simply fall ill." The world tilted beneath her feet. Nicholas's face drained of color. Julian's hand tightened on her shoulder. Eleanor whispered, "What do you mean?" The footman bowed his head. "Mr. Hales says your father may not have died naturally." Chapter 9. Emotional Climax. The air in the drawing room felt too thin to breathe. Eleanor stood between Nicholas and Julianne as Mr. Hales spread a set of old ledgers, letters, and physician's notes across the long mahogany table. The fire crackled faintly behind them, casting unsteady light on the paper on the truth. Hales was shaking. "Miss Hartwell, everyone," he began. "I must warn you, what I am about to say will alter everything." Nicholas's shoulders tensed. Julian folded his arms, jaw tight. The Duchess stood near the doorway, silent but sharp-eyed, as though observing the fall of a dynasty. Eleanor forced her voice through a block of dread. "Tell us, M." Hales placed a single sheet before her. A medical report. Her father's. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, Hales said. But the attending physician noted inconsistencies, fatigue, breathlessness, collapses that were not typical of natural decline. He suspected poisoning. Eleanor's stomach dropped violently. "Poisoning." The word shattered through her like glass. "No," she whispered. "No father he would have told me." "Eleanor." Julian gently touched her arm. "Breathe." But she could not. Her body rebelled. Hales continued, voice cracking with guilt. The physician submitted a request for further investigation, but the document was intercepted before it reached the magistrate. Nicholas's head snapped up. Intercepted by whom? Hales swallowed. His eyes shifted toward the ceiling, toward the grand staircase, toward Agatha's chambers. Eleanor gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "You think my stepmother?" Hales hesitated. The Duchess stepped forward. "Mr. Hales, speak plainly." Hales wiped his brow. "Lady Agatha's signature is on the request withdrawal. She claimed your father's symptoms were due to melancholia. She insisted no investigation was necessary." Julian swore under his breath in French. Nicholas's anger was silent, deadly. He turned toward the stairs as if ready to storm up and drag Agatha down by force. Eleanor stopped him with a trembling hand. "No." He froze. She stepped around him, her voice quiet but steady. "If she did this, if she contributed to my father's death, I will face her myself." Nicholas's eyes widened with something like fear. "Eleanor, you cannot." "I can," she said, "and I will." The Duchess nodded in approval. "She is right." Julian's voice softened. "I will stand with you." But Eleanor was already moving. The confrontation. Agatha's chambers were lit by 2 trembling candles, their flames dancing in the draft from the open window. Agatha herself sat rigid in a velvet chair, a glass of wine half spilled beside her. She looked not triumphant, not composed, but fractured, as if reality had finally cracked the porcelain mask she'd worn for years. When Eleanor entered, Agatha laughed weakly. "Come to gloat? I burned your belongings. What more could you possibly want from me?" Eleanor approached slowly. "I want the truth." Agatha's eyes flickered. Her hand trembled. "You know nothing of truth," Agatha rasped. "Your father, your precious father, he left us drowning in debts. He left me to face society's judgment alone." "You withdrew a request for investigation into his death," Eleanor said. "Why?" Agatha paled. Her lips trembled. "Oh, child," she whispered, "you think me a villain. I wish it were that simple." Julia stepped beside Eleanor. Nicholas stood on her other side, like a silent wall of protection. Agatha laughed hollowly. "You stand there like judges, but you never knew him as I did." Eleanor swallowed hard. "Knew who?" "Your father," Agatha said. He was spiraling, losing his business, losing his friends, losing his hope, and Her voice broke. I could not lose my position, my reputation, my future. So you let him die? Eleanor whispered. Agatha's scream tore out of her like a wound. I did not kill him. I loved him in my way. But I could not allow our ruin to become public. The investigation would have destroyed us both. And letting him did not? Nicholas growled. Agatha slumped back. I thought it would end quietly, that he would pass peacefully, that Eleanor would accept her new place and not pry. Eleanor flinched at the word place. Agatha pressed a shaking hand to her temple. I never meant for him to suffer, but I could not risk my standing. I chose myself. Eleanor stepped back. The truth was worse than malice, worse than hatred. It was selfishness masked as survival. Nicholas exhaled slowly, heartbreak and fury mingling in his eyes. Lady Agatha Ashdown, you have confessed enough to warrant an inquiry. I will take this to the magistrate. Agatha's head snapped up. You wouldn't dare. Julian's voice was soft, deadly. You forfeited the right to mercy when you set fire to the last of her memories. Agatha's breath grew rapid. She clutched the arm of her chair. For the first time, Eleanor saw something more than cruelty in her stepmother. Fear. Real. Wrath. Fear. I will lose everything, Agatha whispered. Eleanor's heart clenched. For all her cruelty, Agatha was still human, still broken. You destroyed everything I had left, Eleanor whispered. And still, I take no pleasure in your downfall. Agatha blinked, disoriented. Nicholas stepped forward. Eleanor, she lifted a hand. This is my decision. Nicholas fell silent. Eleanor took a breath, then another. I will not stop the inquiry, she said, voice trembling but strong. The truth must be known, but I will not ask for your imprisonment. Agatha sagged in relief. But, Eleanor continued, I will demand one thing. Agatha's head lifted. You will leave London, Eleanor said, quietly, permanently. You will not speak my name again. You will not approach Clara again. You will not attempt to influence my inheritance or future. Tears filled Agatha's eyes. You mean to exile me? No, Eleanor said softly. You chose that yourself. Agatha broke, collapsed into her chair, sobbing into her hands. Julian exhaled deeply. Nicholas looked shaken. The Duchess, who had slipped quietly into the doorway, nodded with regal approval. Well handled, Miss Hartwell. Eleanor closed her eyes. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like growing up all at once. The aftermath downstairs. The great hall was empty when Eleanor returned, except for Nicholas and Julian. Both men rose as she entered. She looked at them both, waiting for her, caring for her, offering different kinds of futures. Her heart throbbed painfully. Julian approached first. I am proud of you, he said softly. You faced cruelty with dignity. You did not let vengeance consume you. He hesitated. My offer stands, Eleanor. Come to London with me. Build a new life, on your terms. His eyes searched hers with sincerity, admiration, growing affection. Then Nicholas stepped forward. His voice was rough. Eleanor, I cannot undo what my father or I have done, but I swear to you, everything I am now, everything I will become, will be shaped by the vow I made tonight. He swallowed. To protect you, to honor you, to walk beside you, not ahead or behind, if you allow it. Eleanor's breath shook. 2 men, 2 futures, 2 kinds of love. But tonight was not about choosing. Tonight was about reclaiming herself. I will go to London, she said quietly. But not for either of you. Julian's brows lifted. Nicholas' breath hitched. I will go because I choose to, she said. Because my life begins now, not as Agatha's victim, not as the daughter of a ruined estate, not as the girl who loved a duke, but as myself. Julian smiled, soft and proud. Nicholas closed his eyes, relief and agony intertwined. Before she could speak again, a sharp knock sounded on the door. The butler rushed in. Miss Hartwell, your grace, Mr. Laurent London has heard of tonight's events. The gossip has already spread. Society is demanding that Miss Hartwell appear at Lady Wexford's midnight gathering tonight. Eleanor froze. A public social appearance. Tonight, with society whispering, judging, expecting humiliation. Nicholas went rigid. Julian stiffened. Eleanor lifted her chin. Very well, she said, I will attend. The butler blinked. Miss, are you certain? Yes. Her voice was calm, steady, transforming. If society wishes to see me, Eleanor declared, then I will let them witness the woman I am becoming. Nicholas stared at her with unmasked awe. Julian looked spellbound. The Duchess smiled. "Prepare yourselves, gentlemen," she said. "London is about to meet Eleanor Hartwell, and somewhere beyond the hall, beyond the manor, beyond the life she once knew, London waited." Chapter 3. Slow Burn Resolution. London had never seemed so alive. Carriages rattled like restless hearts across the cobblestones outside Lady Wexford's townhouse. Lanterns glowed through misted air, gilding the pavement in trembling gold. Inside, strings swelled with elegant tension as the most influential members of society buzzed with delicious anticipation. They had all heard the rumors. The fallen heiress, the scandal at Ashdown, the Duke kneeling before her, the stepmother's breakdown, two men, both of status, fighting for her future. Every fan fluttered, every whisper crackled, and into this glittering storm stepped Eleanor Hartwell. Not escorted by a duke, not claimed by a scholar, but walking of her own will, chin lifted, shoulders straight, grief tucked beneath dignity, fire burning beneath composure. Her gown, borrowed from the Duchess of Yarmouth for the evening, was twilight silk, soft as breath, cut elegantly without a hint of ostentation. It wasn't meant to seduce. It was meant to assert. Nicholas trailed a respectful step behind her. Julian matched her pace at the other side. To the watching crowd, she looked flanked by guardians. To herself, she felt uncaged. The room fell to a hush. Lady Wexford, triumphant at the center of the ballroom, approached with an exaggerated display of welcome. "Miss Hartwell," she purred, "what a pleasure. You have electrified London." Eleanor smiled lightly. "Then London should purchase better grounding." Soft laughter rippled, not ridicule, surprise, intrigue. Lady Wexford blinked, then smiled approvingly. "Well said, my dear." Behind her, an entire flock of society matrons pretended not to stare. Unsuccessfully, Nicholas leaned slightly closer to Eleanor, not touching, not assuming, just near. "You're remarkable," he murmured. She did not respond. Julian, hearing him, gave a faint, amused huff. She does not need to be told what she already knows. Eleanor's lips twitched, but Lady Wexford wasn't done stirring the pot. "My dear," she said loudly enough for the nearby guests to hear, "I simply must ask, are the rumors true? Has the Duke of Harrow taken you under his care?" Nicholas stiffened. Eleanor felt the hush tighten. She looked directly at Lady Wexford. "No, my lady," she said calmly. "The Duke does not have me under anything. I am simply choosing to walk beside him until matters are settled." Gasps. An approving murmur from the Duchess. Nicholas's breath visibly loosened equal parts admiration and ache. Julian smiled softly, murmuring, "Magnifique." Lady Wexford, delighted by the drama, pressed further. "And is it also true that Monsieur Laurent has invited you to join his father's institute in London?" Julian bowed slightly. "It is true. Miss Hartwell would revolutionize our work. She is a mind worth building futures upon." Nicholas shot him a tinsiglancy. Julian replied with polite, relentless calm. "Two men, two futures, neither overshadowing her." Eleanor answered before the tension could thicken. "I have made no decisions," she said clearly. "Tonight, I am simply Eleanor." Her voice carried. People leaned in. Her presence commanded more than curiosity. It commanded respect. Nicholas looked at her with something almost reverent. The man who once feared vulnerability now stood humbled by the woman who allowed none to claim her. But social victory was not the goal of the night. Truth was, dignity was, the reclaiming of her own story was. A moment alone. Eleanor slipped onto a small balcony overlooking the lamplit street, drawing cool air into her lungs. The night was sharp, alive, and she felt finally larger than her pain. A soft step behind her. Nicholas. He kept his distance. The lesson of humility had finally taken root. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" she asked without turning. "For allowing me to accompany you tonight. For allowing me to try, even in the smallest measure." Eleanor exhaled. "You didn't kneel for forgiveness, Nicholas," she said. "You knelt for absolution. They're not the same." He closed his eyes. "Yes, I know. And I have not given either." "Yes," he whispered. She turned, then slowly. Nicholas Harrow looked different now. Less an untouchable duke, more a man stripped bare of illusions. "I loved you," Eleanor said. "Not an accusation, not a confession, just truth. I waited for you. You vanished." A muscle in his jaw jumped. "I punished myself for that every day." "Good," she whispered, "because I will not pretend it didn't break me." He swallowed hard. "But I also will not allow what happened between our fathers, or what happened between us, to dictate my future." Her voice steadied. "I choose my life now." Nicholas nodded, grief and respect mingling in his eyes. "Then let me walk behind you, beside you wherever you choose. Not as a claim, but as a consequence, if you'll have me." Eleanor's lips parted. It was the closest thing to a love confession she had ever heard that wasn't wrapped in possessiveness, but humility. She stepped closer. "Just one step. You will earn your place in my life, Nicholas," she said softly. "Not through guilt, not through protection, but through consistency." He bowed his head. "Yes, and if I choose Julian's offer?" Nicholas froze. "Then," he said finally, quietly, "I will disappear again if that is what you want. But this time, I will not leave without your blessing." Her heart wavered. But before she could answer, Julian appeared in the balcony doorway. "Eleanor," he said gently, "Lady Wexford is about to make a toast. She asked for you specifically." Nicholas stepped aside, always stepping aside now. Learning, Julian offered his arm not possessively, but respectfully. "May I escort you?" Eleanor looked between them. One man learning to let go of pride. One man ready to lift her without expectation. She lifted her chin. "I will walk alone," she said. Both men stepped back instantly. She passed between them, neither man touching her, each watching her with different hopes. When she entered the ballroom, all eyes rose. Lady Wexford raised her glass. "The young woman standing before us has survived scandal, cruelty, loss. And tonight, she arrives not as a victim, but as a force." Eleanor felt the room shift around her. "The future of London," Lady Wexford declared, "may very well rest in her hands." The crowd erupted in applause. Eleanor's chest tightened, not with fear, with purpose. And then, a voice sliced through the noise with chilling precision. "Well," a man drawled from near the back, "if it isn't Ashdown's forgotten daughter, let's hope she fares better in London than her poor father did." Silence slammed down. Eleanor's pulse thundered. Nicholas moved, but Eleanor lifted a hand, stopping him from across the room. She turned toward the man slowly, deliberately, and walked forward to confront him. Not as a girl ruined by circumstance, but as a woman who would not be broken again. Chapter 11. Epilogue. Months later. 6 months later, London. Spring had settled over London with a gentler hand that year. Blossoms spilled from balcony planters along Grosvenor Square. Carriages hummed with a softer noise, as though even the city itself had begun to breathe differently. And through it all, Eleanor Hartwell walked with the confidence of a woman who had rebuilt her life from ash. Her name, once whispered with pity or scandal, had become synonymous with something new: resilience, intellect, influence, promise. The Laurent Institute proudly displayed her work. Her essays on trade ethics and social reform had garnered attention across journals and salons. Young women sought her guidance. Politicians listened when she spoke. She had become a voice, not loud, but unmistakable. Julianne Laurent had been a constant ally, respectful, supportive, devoted to her mind rather than her status. They worked together often, debated philosophy and reform, walked to evening lectures side by side. Their bond had grown into something warm, steady, profound, but not possessive, not binding, a gentle thread, not a tether. And Nicholas Harrow? He had changed in ways even he did not fully recognize. He no longer appeared in London as a man armored by title and legacy. He came quietly walking to the Institute instead of sending for a carriage, listening more than speaking, asking instead of commanding. He had made good on every promise of humility. Never forcing, never assuming, always earning. He and Julian had grown, if not friendly, at least respectful of one another. Two men who realized they were part of Eleanor's life, but not permitted to shape it. And Eleanor? She found herself drawn to Nicholas again, but slowly, not to the Duke, to the man who had learned to kneel not for forgiveness, but for transformation. Tonight, she stood in the courtyard garden behind the Institute, lanterns glowing above her as she finished giving a lecture to a circle of young women. Their applause faded into night air. warm as spring wine. Julian approached first. "You were magnificent," he said softly. "Thank you," she said with genuine affection. "You know," he added, "I still keep my offer open. Partnership, shared projects, a future built together if you ever choose it." She smiled. "I know." Julian squeezed her hand once, gentle, grateful, and slipped back inside to tidy the lecture hall. Eleanor turned toward the far gate. Nicholas stood there, waiting. Not in the shadows, but in the open. He had learned. She walked toward him, steps unhurried. "Good evening, Your Grace." He shook his head. "Just Nicholas. Tonight and always." Her lips curved. "Nicholas, then." He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "I heard your lecture from the corridor," he said. "You astonish me." "I should hope so," she teased. "I work very hard at it." He laughed softly, a sound she had missed more than she'd admit aloud. They walked together beneath the climbing rose vines. "When I look at you now," Nicholas said quietly, "I see all the ways I once failed to understand your strength. I see how much I needed to change, how much I still need to earn." Eleanor stopped walking. "Nicholas," she said gently, "I do not want a man ruined by guilt, nor a duke who kneels for absolution. I want someone who stands beside me, someone who respects my choices, even if those choices do not include him." Nicholas looked at her for a long, aching moment. "And if they someday do?" he asked softly. She felt her heart soften, not unravel, not surrender, just soften. "Then," she said, "you will know because I will choose you freely, not out of brokenness, not out of longing, not out of rescue, but out of partnership." Nicholas nodded. "Then I will continue becoming the man worthy of that choice." There was no desperation in his voice anymore, only truth. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Nicholas offered his arm, not insistently, not expectantly. Eleanor considered. And this time, she took it, not as surrender, as equality. They walked slowly beneath lanterns swaying in the breeze, the future open and unforced. At the gate, Nicholas paused. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "may I tell you something?" "Of course." He held her gaze with a tenderness he had once been too proud to show. "You taught me that love isn't possession," he murmured. "It's permission to grow, to change, to try again." Eleanor's chest tightened, but with warmth rather than ache. "And you taught me," she replied, "that a broken past does not disqualify a man, but refusing to rise from it does." Nicholas closed his eyes briefly, moved more deeply than he could hide. They stood there, the city humming around them, the night scented with new blossoms. Not a fairy tale ending, a beginning, a partnership shaped not by power, but by choice. Final quotes. "Eleanor, I reclaimed my life the moment I stopped waiting to be chosen and chose myself instead." Nicholas, and I became worthy the moment I realized love must bow to respect before it can rise into devotion.